Computer. Hi, my name is Renee Hobbs. Welcome to COM 416. Today's date is Wednesday, March 21st. It's the first day of spring. Woohoo! And I guess maybe campus is open or not open. I'm not really sure, but because we're online, we're here. So I see joining us, I see Kelsey, Olivia, Madison, and Peyton. Thanks so much for joining me today. So we have a pretty big agenda, but it's kind of weird to be back from spring break, right? And I think the main thing is we're really feeling the impending end of the semester, right? 6 more weeks to go, so it's going to be kind of a fast and furious ride to the finish line. But I have a lot of confidence that you're all going to do just fine. Let me share my screen with you. And oh, hold on, I've got a bunch of windows open here. I better close all these open windows here, and I will share my screen with you, and we'll get started. Share screen. There we go. Okay, so we're like starting back to after the spring break. We're starting to shift gears a little bit, right? In the first part of the semester, we really drilled down on contemporary propaganda, right? We, as you remember from the first 6 weeks of the semester, we dealt with virality, we dealt with attention economics, we dealt with all those new forms of propaganda like clickbait and sponsored content. We dealt with propaganda in marketing and in advertising and public relations. We explored some of the unexpected consequences of propaganda. We took a step back into history by looking at the work of Eddie Bernays, but then tackled the beneficial aspects of propaganda with our careful study of texting and driving, and looked at Coney 2012 and the blurring of art, journalism, and advocacy. And now we're going to take a deep dive into understanding Nazi propaganda. And that's because more than 99% of everybody on the URI campus, and that's 15,000 people, after taking this course, you're kind of now going to be an expert on propaganda. You certainly have acquired a lot of information about contemporary propaganda, but everyone will expect that you be knowledgeable about Nazi propaganda, so we're going to focus in on it. But we're focusing in on it in kind of a unique way. We're trying to see if we can make connections between past and present, propaganda of the past and propaganda of the present. And so we're looking back into history, not so much for the history, but for the lessons and insights that it might have for us today. So really our inquiry in history falls in 3 parts. Part 1, we're looking at how did Hitler get elected and how did he use propaganda to do it. Part 2, how did he create hatred so that he could justify the dictatorship. And third, how did he use propaganda to exterminate 6 million Jews and other people? So that's the arc of the journey that we're going on. So this week, let's just talk a little bit about the themes that we're going to explore here. Oops, what happened to my computer here? Ah, there we go, slow but sure here. Let's see if I can find the page that I'm looking for. It's just giving me a blank white one. What's wrong with that? You know, oh, there we go. Slowly but surely. So I want to talk a little bit about the key ideas that you encountered in the first couple of chapters of State of Deception, because it's really clear to me that from your use of the Pathright that you got a lot of these big ideas. But I want to kind of call out the things that I think are most important. And one of the ways that I thought it would be useful for us to do that was to take a look at this really cool website. Of course, since I've been collaborating and consulting for the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum for about 7 years now since this exhibit, the propaganda exhibit, was first launched in 2007. I kind of feel a little embarrassed to show you this website, but this was a state-of-the-art website in 2007. And you were pretty young then, right? So it may not feel so state-of-the-art now, but there are still many things that I really like about it. So let's go explore. And you see it says, please make sure you have Flash, right? Because it requires Flash to work. Let's see if I've got my Flash installed. Yeah, here we go. So one of the things that's really cool about this website is that it basically moves you through the process. You see the timeline scrolling at the, I don't know if you can actually see that, the timeline scrolling at the bottom of the page, right? I can look at Hitler's rise from the very beginning. The story generally starts with the ending of World War I, right? And the really bad economic position that Germany was in after that, and the terrible atrocity stories and the use of propaganda that happened in World War I was pretty ferocious. And Hitler's formation of a political party, and him going to prison, and him getting out of prison, and him writing Mein Kampf, and the period that we're looking up to is just right now until he gets appointed, right? As he gets appointed to be the chancellor. So let's see, that's right about here, 1932. 1932. So many people think that Hitler was elected. He was not. He was appointed. But and he never won more than 33% of the vote. But we really have to look at his strategies as a politician. And one way I like to do that is this game. It's kind of a goofy game, but I think you'll enjoy looking at it. And I think having read the chapter, the game will make a lot of sense for you. So we're looking at the part of the website called Making a Leader, right? So the public has always craved charismatic leaders, and Hitler was certainly a charismatic leader. We learned about this idea called the cult of the Führer, that he was really well aware that people love putting people up on pedestals. Well, and they sometimes like knocking them down too, right? But they like putting people up on pedestals, don't they? And so this little interactive media uses some of the same photos that you found in the book, right? About his fantastic oratorial skills, how his posters were strong and simple. But I really, really like, I like the activity called The Many Faces of Hitler. And so why don't we play this game, right? I'm going to call on you guys and ask you to play the game with me. Are you up for it? Give me a thumbs up if you're up for it. Thank you so much. You guys are going to play the game with me. Okay, it says here, Nazi propaganda experts carefully utilized images of Hitler to portray him as a military leader, savior, father of the nation, or politician. In each of the following images, which role do you think is best represented? Okay, so Peyton, you're going to go first, okay? So here's an image. It's a propaganda poster. Which role do you think is best represented in this image? Military leader, father of the nation, politician, or savior? Turn on your microphone. And
I would say father of the nation.
And why would you say that, Peyton?
Because there's a young boy in front of his face. Kind of seems like Hitler's like overlooking him.
Got it. So you notice that contrast between the child, it says you are correct, right? So this is a reference to the Hitler Youth program where German youngsters celebrated Hitler's birthday as a national holiday. Imagine that. And eventually it became mandatory to join the Hitler Youth, as we will see in the next part of the readings. Okay, so Madison, are you ready to be next?
Ready.
Okay, here we go. Here's your image. Which role do you think is best represented in this image?
Um,
Military leader, father of the nation, politician, or savior?
I would either say military leader or politician, because I would say military leader because he's in front of a bunch of people and he looks like he's like ready to either make an argument, or a politician meaning he's ready to speak in front of all these people.
Yeah, that's a really good point. If we only spoke German, oh, look here. It says, yes, leader, we follow you. Okay, so now which one, if you have to choose, they're both two possible, which one do you think it might be?
Military leader.
Uh-huh. No, so father of the nation, says the experts. This propaganda embodies the idea that Hitler was the embodiment of the national will, right? So that really he was representing the whole country by his presence. Okay, good try. Olivia, I do not see you. Where are you, girl? Oh, there she is. Olivia, are you ready to play this game with me?
Yes.
Yes, you are. I'm so proud of you. Thank you so much. Here's your image. Okay, the many faces of Hitler. Which role do you think is best represented in this image? Up here it says, we will take the fate of the nation into our hands. And down here it says, yes, we will take the fate of the nation into our hands. Which role do you think is best represented in this image?
I would say either savior or father of the nation.
Got it. And pick one and give me a reason.
I'm gonna say savior because he's like he's trying to convey the message to the German people that he has a plan, he has a power to raise Germany out of like the hole it's dug itself into.
Okay, I think that's pretty good. It says, sorry, no, we will take the fate of the nation into our hand, will be the right president. It says politician, or no, yeah, politician is the right answer. Politician is the right answer. Let's see if I wonder if I can go back and see the reasoning there. What happens if I go back? If I click out of this and I go back, I want the rationale for why. Let me just skip this. I can't do it. It gives me yet another image. All right, Meredith, are you there? You want to play this game with us?
Yes.
Okay, here you go. Here's your image. See if you can make a guess. Which role do you think is best represented in this image? Military leader, politician, father of the nation, savior? The poster says, the Führer promised to motorize Germany. And you see 1932, there were this many cars. And look, by 1935, there's this many cars. The Führer promised to motorize Germany.
So, first of all, I'm sorry, I don't know why my video is not working.
Oh no.
I just have audio right now. I think it's applicable for a lot of them, but I'd probably say savior because he's promising that he's going to give them a big economic boom.
Good point. So, nope, it says actually politician. In 1933, Hitler launched the construction of the national highway system, which provided employment and rejuvenated the auto industry and helped increase ownership. However, notice this. Nazi propagandists inflated the actual numbers of Germans employed in the public works projects and concealed both the party's opposition to a highway system during the Weimar years and the intended military benefits of the highway system, right? So one of the things that's, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I feel like politician is euphemistic for all those other terms.
Indeed. One of the things that I really appreciate about this website is the way that it gives us expert commentary. And since you read the State of Deception, you're aware of this very famous image, right? This is the image where Hitler is greeting the elected president, Paul Hindenburg, the military general. He won the election, and Hitler is brought in as chancellor. One of the things that I really like about this is the way it offers us a commentary. And I feel like if I do this, will I get to a commentary? Now, there's a commentary somewhere here. I got to see if I can find it. Hold on here. The commentary on this image is really fascinating because, oh yeah, there we go. Because it explores how this image was, how carefully constructed this was. This is not just a photojournalism. This is a piece of propaganda as photojournalism. Let's listen.
Take a close look at the details of the photograph for clues to the relationship between these two men. Hitler appears to be bowing to Hindenburg. He is wearing the plain dark suit of a European statesman, not his brown Nazi Party uniform. Hindenburg, who is over 6 feet in height, stands erect. He is dressed in the full military regalia of a senior German general, including his many medals. The soldier standing between Hitler and Hindenburg is Hindenburg's bodyguard. Who is the bodyguard watching?
Looks like the bodyguard is watching Hitler, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so let me see if can I scroll out to this? See, this is the problem with digital media from 10 years ago. Let's listen to the next one.
Was a conservative nationalist and a war hero. Only months before this picture was taken, Hitler lost the presidential election to Hindenburg. Under the German Constitution, the president, the chief executive officer, had the responsibility of appointing the chancellor, the chief legislative officer. Hindenburg became convinced that it was better to bring Hitler into the government and to work with him, rather than risk having Hitler work against him. So Hindenburg appointed Hitler to be chancellor. Hitler was not elected to his office.
Okay, so one of the things that's really, really important to realize is that only 1 month after this photo was taken, only 1 month after this photo was taken, Hitler basically suspended democracy in Germany and turned the country basically into a dictatorship. So he didn't waste any time after he became chancellor. And we're going to learn in part 2 of the next chapter how skillfully he suppressed democracy and what he did to destroy his political enemies and turn Germany into a dictatorship. So that is coming up next. But there's a big idea in the book that many of you did not comment on that I wanted to emphasize because to understand the whole story, understanding this part of it is important. One of the things that it says in the first section of the book, it says that one of the reasons why Hitler was an appealing candidate, many of you noted, he targeted messages to specific target audiences like women and students and unemployed people. Many of you mentioned that he downplayed anti-Semitic ideas with some audiences and he upplayed them with other audiences, right? But not too many of you mentioned how Hitler argued basically for unity, for the German people to have unity. He argued a very positive idea. His political campaign was about putting public welfare ahead of private self-interest. And that's a really positive message, right? So unlike what we've just been through in the last couple of years, which is a lot of negative campaigning, Hitler did not use negative campaigning that much. I mean, he criticized the Marxists for sure, right? But he really ran a very positive campaign in a lot of ways. And that's kind of surprising because we don't think of Hitler as basically fighting for an idea. But some part of his idea of national unity was really, really compelling to his target audiences.
Oh, sorry. No, I did note that. I thought it was interesting because I didn't realize that, but there was a quote from one of the leaders of the Social Democratic Party who said, unfortunately, his idealistic campaigning is going to be a lot more productive than targeting specific self-interests. because he would just be vague about things to get a broad appeal for the wide audience, which I thought was really interesting.
Yep, great observation. You know, it's a really interesting thing about how his performance skills, his interest in opera and theater, his aesthetic sensibility, his flair for the dramatic really supported his skillfulness at organizing rallies. I thought one of the fascinating things in the book was this idea about how carefully and precisely he would organize every aspect of those rallies. Like nothing was left to chance, right? So what's not talked about too much in this volume is how he involved the stormtroopers. I'm now reading another book about Nazi propaganda. And of course, it was this combination of propaganda plus street violence, right? The stormtroopers were this quasi-military group that would go around beating up the Marxists and the labor union guys. And, you know, together that was kind of an unbeatable combination. You know, some displays of public violence in the streets, to show how tough you are, and then this very positive propaganda. So pretty unbeatable combination in a lot of ways. Okay, so the other thing that I asked you guys to read about for this week was about the bots. Oh, and wasn't it fascinating? You guys did such a great job on your flip grids about the bots. I was really pleased to see that. Let me see if I can pull that up right now. I was really pleased about how you engaged in dialogue with each other, gave each other warm feedback, pointed out different things. And it was also really cool to see how, depending on which hyperlink you followed, you all kind of learned some different things. I myself followed the hyperlink about Mexico and Turkey to try to understand how political bots were being used in other countries. That's because I just got back from Brazil. But you all followed different hyperlinks, and as a result, I really appreciated learning about this. I found myself doing something really weird, which I'm going to show you. I found myself just researching, just as a researcher, you know. I mean, Twitter is not often thought of as a research tool, but it can be a very powerful research tool. And so I just typed in bots and propaganda, and I found some really fascinating and also scary stuff. It was fascinating and scary to see the conversation that's going on right now about the role of propaganda bots right now during the Mueller investigation and as part of the sort of perspectives of Trump supporters and Trump detractors. So just saying, if you wanted to further amuse yourself, that would be a great way to do it. But it's 4/23, and I really have to talk about Leap 3. Leap 3 is due April 11th, and it's perhaps one of the coolest assignments I think you'll get to do in this class. You're comparing and contrasting propaganda in the past and in the present. I know that many of you have had a chance to look over the specifications for this assignment because many of you have already identified your partner for this project. This is a really important first step. And by now you should have your name in the already committed partner here. I'm happy to see Peyton and Dominique and Samantha and Monica and Olivia. Who's your partner? I'm going to see if I can scroll down to see here. But I'm really happy to see that the partners are shaping up nicely. If you're watching this video and you haven't got a partner yet, you better quickly, good show. Meredith and Quina, woohoo, happy to see it. But I want to talk a little bit about what you're probably doing right now, which is you're thinking about what is comparing and contrasting, and you're in the process of selecting 2 examples of propaganda. I want to talk about that a little bit more. That should be happening right now as you begin to go into your research phase. I put this chart down here at the bottom to kind kind of illustrate what the structure of the academic essay needs to include to meet my expectations for this work. First, you're explaining your rationale for the two examples of propaganda that you select from two different time periods. And you're describing both of those examples briefly to justify why they are propaganda, right? So you're going to have to make some choices and then explain why you think these choices that you've made qualify, why they can be defined as propaganda. Then you're going to describe and analyze key features of the first example using concepts from the course readings to analyze. Then you're going to describe and analyze the key features of the second example using key ideas from the readings to analyze. But then the real meat of the comparison contrast essay is you identifying the similarities between the two examples and the differences between the two examples. By doing this, you will gain some insights that that emerge from comparing and contrasting. Now, I myself am a big fan of the Venn diagram. I think that's a great organizational tool to start to figure out what do these two pieces of propaganda have in common and how are they different. But over the last couple of years since I've asked students to do this work, I've found something really interesting, which is it's actually perhaps more productive when you're searching for what are you comparing and contrasting, is to explore examples from the past first and then search for examples from the present. It makes sense why we might want to do that, right? It makes sense why we might want to do it that way because you're familiar with tons and tons of propaganda from the present, but you don't have as big of a repertoire from propaganda of the past. And oh, by the way, there's so much past, you know, such a big swath of past, right? So I thought one of the things I'd like to do with you now is have you explore some of the fascinating propaganda examples that are out there for the taking. So here's what I'd like to do right now, if I may. I'm going to ask each one of you to watch a different piece of propaganda from the examples that are on the chart, and then we'll come back together as a large group and talk about them. So, Peyton, will you analyze the first example? It's called All Wrong, Old Laddiebuck.
Yeah.
It's animated propaganda from World War I that was produced a long, long time ago. It's the oldest, one of the oldest pieces of animation propaganda that I could find. Madison, will you look at the educational film from 1949 called Propaganda Education? Yep. Good
Yes.
show. Kelsey, will you watch the Act Your Age educational film from 1949?
Yeah, where do we find this again?
Okay, so on the home page, we're on the page for today's class. It's week 8's theme,
Right.
Propaganda for Votes and Power, right?
Mm-hmm.
And here we are right there. Give me a thumbs up if you found it.
Got it.
Good show. Okay, so Meredith, will you look at A Face in the Crowd, which is a trailer for the 1957 film, feature film, Hollywood film, featuring Andy Griffith.
Okay.
Matt, will you check out the LBJ ice cream ad?
Yep.
Okay, good show. So I've got Matt, Madison, Kelsey, Peyton, Meredith. Is there anybody else there that I haven't gotten? Okay, now here's the thing. These are all different length pieces. I'm going to have you watch for exactly 5 minutes. We're going to set the timer right now. You're going to watch for 5 minutes. At 4:35, you're going to stop watching and we're going to come back into the Zoom. Give me a thumbs up if you're cool on that. Okay, so one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to mute my microphone and I'm going to stop my video while I watch the one that I'm going to watch. And I'll see you guys back here in 5 minutes. All right, let's go.
Do you know what people used to do? They used to explode atomic bombs in the air. Now, children should have lots of vitamin A and calcium, but they shouldn't have any strontium-90.
Okay, so it looks like we are back, right? All right, give me a thumbs up if you are in fact back. Okay, now we have a lot of really interesting propaganda to discuss. I'm going to ask that you give us a little description of what you saw and what your thoughts and feelings were as you watched it. Peyton, let's start with you. You looked at the All Wrong Old Laddiebuck animated propaganda from World War I. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, so my video started out at like a war camp, and it was all the soldiers saying like, we want to go home, whatever. And then it looked like a man in charge came up to them and was kind of like, no. And then they mentioned Uncle Sam. So I felt that that was kind of a reference that would like, you know what I mean? Everybody knows who Uncle Sam is. And then this woman pulled up, and she pulled up in a car that said Joy on the side. And he got in the car with her, and then they went on a joy ride, and then he ended up getting in trouble, and he ended up getting charged with joyriding. So it was kind of a confusing video.
Propaganda. It's an animation, right? Very simple.
Yeah.
Animation. Why might it be considered propaganda?
I don't know. I was kind of confused because it was talking about like, it almost made it seem like in the beginning they wanted people to feel like they should be serving the military, and then after that it kind of made it seem like it wasn't any fun because they weren't allowed to go joyriding. So I kind of felt like it contradicted itself a little bit.
Yeah, good point. Clearly the target audience for this piece is a little bit unknown, right? We're not sure really who is it targeting. But if it's targeting soldiers who might be wanting to go joyriding, it shows the risks and dangers of that, right?
Yeah.
So it's a really old form of propaganda. It's disguised as entertainment. Like it looks like one of those early Walt Disney kind of cartoons, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it looks like entertainment, but it might be propaganda. Cool. Kelsey, you're next. Can you tell us about the propaganda you watched and what thoughts and feelings you had as you looked at it?
I watched the film Act Your Age, and it started out with these kids. It looked like they were in high school. They were doing math problems, and this one boy like was getting frustrated, so he had this pen that he was carving his name into, and the teacher caught him. So then she had him like write a letter to the principal, and he had to tell him like what happened. And the principal was like, okay, he's like, I'll sand it down, I'll make it sure like there's nothing wrong with it anymore. And he's like, that's fine. He was like, well, what else do you want me to do? He's like, I have a problem because everyone in the school is growing up. And he said that he was watching guys play baseball and they were acting like children. That's about as far as I got.
Okay, so why might that film be considered a form of propaganda, possibly?
I mean, I think the way they're saying that like people who are older are acting like children and they don't know, they're like saying that it's a problem that they grow up but they still act like kids.
Yeah, so the film is trying to persuade teenagers that they need to have some emotional maturity, right? And stop acting like babies. So this is educational and propaganda probably at the same time. Yeah, cool. Okay, let's see. Meredith, I think you're next. Can you tell us about the propaganda you looked at and describe what it was, and then tell us a little bit about your thoughts and feelings as you watched it? Up, sound.
It was this film, A Face in the Crowd. It was just a 2-minute trailer. And it's Andy Griffith as a famous singer. So they show him in the crowds being really popular, and then they cut to him behind the scenes saying, I'm not just an entertainer, I'm a wielder of opinion. So this is clearly an example of how propaganda is something that exists outside of just a political sphere, and that these spaces of the entertainment industry can also be used to persuade the public.
Yeah, a fascinating film that takes the concept of celebrity culture to look at its possibly dangerous impact on public opinion. Kind of a fascinating example of propaganda about celebrity culture from the 1950s. Cool. Madison, can you tell us a little bit about the propaganda that you looked at and describe what it was and what your thoughts and feelings were as you watched it?
Sure. So I watched a video, and it started with two men, one a little bit younger than the other. And it starts to talk about how you can see propaganda in a lot of different places and how it's used in a bunch of different places. And it talks about what we learned about a little bit this week with the glittering generalizations, name calling, card stacking, all that kind of stuff. And it also gave examples while it did it, which kind of gave you a good explanation as it continued on and went through.
Yeah, so this might not be propaganda. It might be just education, but chances are it also has some intention to change the behaviors and attitudes of the people who watch this video. So Matt, you're next. What did you watch, and what was it, and what'd you find yourself thinking about as you watched it?
The first one I watched was the LBJ ice cream ad, and it was about the president election. And it was just a video. The whole video was just like black and white, and it was a young girl, like a couple years old, like probably 5, and she's just eating an ice cream cone. It's just her licking an ice cream cone, and then it's just like a voiceover of a lady like it sounds like a presidential like election commercial, and she's just saying like girls or she's like children need certain vitamins from the sun, and like and they like and whatever, and then they need certain vitamins to like grow up and be healthy. But she was like, if we have atomic bombs like being erupted in the air, then like they're not going to get these vitamins. And then it's like there's a treaty being signed, and they're like, we want or this president is voting against the treaty to get rid of the atomic bomb, so why would you vote for him?
Nice. And so why do you think it's propaganda?
It's basically just explaining why not, or why the atomic thing's bad, and then whether who's president you should vote for is based off that.
Yeah, nice. A very weird version of us versus them, right? We never see either presidential candidate. We just see this girl with the friggin' ice cream.
Looking ice cream.
But it definitely is targeting moms, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely targeting moms, and it's making moms afraid. If you vote for the wrong person, your daughter will be poisoned. Like, it's scary, right? So, okay. So one of the reasons why, it's useful for you to go on your hunt for old propaganda first is that it's the most unfamiliar to you. And it's the one that's going to need more context and research to even make sense of it, right? Like for these examples that I just shared with you, right? To understand any of them, you're going to have to do some more reading to understand what they were meant for, who their target audience was, what was the time period that made these things seem relevant. But that's really the point of this assignment. And so I want to share with you some of the places where you might go to start to find your historic propaganda. So I'm taking you back up here. Give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen sharing right now. So, of course, a shortcut to find Leap 3 is here under assignments, right? Oops, why is it taking so long? Right? So compare propaganda of the past and the present. And I made a list of some of the coolest places where you can find easy online access to propaganda. So you will find some great places to search for historic propaganda here. And I want to talk you through them because this is a situation where you and your partner doing a little divide and conquer. You guys can get a lot done in finding your examples. It's on the page where the syllabus is located. Check out these resources. Of course, Indiana University has a treasure trove of World War II government propaganda films. That's cool. There's a political ad archive from the last election to get at the present stuff of the Trump-Clinton campaign. There's a really interesting archive of old fictional feature films. And like Meredith showed, sometimes feature films, entertainment media, as we've discussed, entertainment media can be propaganda, right? There's a really great set of education propaganda, like the emotional maturity one and the propaganda on propaganda at the Prelinger Archives. This guy's like a famous collector of historic 16 millimeter films that were used in the 1940s and the 1950s and the 1960s. Your grandparents probably got exposed to this form of propaganda when they were growing up. There's a great resource where you can actually look at the historic newspapers at the Library of Congress, because there's a ton of propaganda in the news media. And a print source would be a really interesting choice for some of you. You can access hundreds of old ads at the Duke University Ad Access site, or check out the old radio shows. I was listening to one old radio show, and there was absolutely some pretty awful, I think, racist propaganda from the 1930s there. And sometimes some anti-Semitic propaganda can be found on radio. Then there's another place where you can listen to old-time radio shows. It's just like one click and you're listening to something from the 1930s or 40s or 50s. There's a lot of radio advertising at the Internet Archive. There's a lot of cool TV news clips at the TV News Archive at the Internet Archive. Old TV shows by the dozens, westerns, comedies, game shows, and more. You can find a lot of propaganda there. Old TV commercials. British war propaganda posters are collected at this website. And of course, the New York Times has the cool way that you can search the old issues of the New York Times, so you can see examples of articles, op-ed columns, advertising. The whole newspaper, just like as if it were a real newspaper, is digitally available for you to scan through. There's a cool website called Adaholic that has a lot of old magazine ads. And then there's the vintage ad browser with propaganda posters. And then if you're looking for more recent stuff, there's contemporary ads at Colorbus. And this is just scratching the surface. So finding the artifacts is really going to help you build the core of your argument. It's probably the most important decision you make in your Leap 3 assignment. It's a good activity for you to do together and to find lots of possible old ones and new ones, and then figure out what's the best way to do a comparison contrast. Now, some students in the past have asked me, well, how old is old? Trust me, you're not going to do well in this Leap 3 if you compare something produced in 2017 to something produced in 2012. Okay, that's not old enough, right? If you know what I mean, right? So I think if you go before the 21st century, you'll be fine. But you have a lot of choice right now. And in fact, that's the cool, wonderful thing about this assignment, and also the real intellectual challenge. Choosing the artifacts that you subject to analysis. I would say focus on stuff you're interested in. Let your passion guide your choices. See this as an opportunity to become an expert on something, right? And you're going to have a blast. Now, what questions do you have about Leap 3? Now that you've kind of gotten an outline of what the assignment should be like and the process of how you can pick your artifacts, do you have any questions that are like you're thinking about?
The only deliverable at the end is the essay, right? Or do we?
2 deliverables. Good question. 2 deliverables. Let's review that to make sure
Right,
we're really clear on that. You owe me an 8 to 12 page academic paper submitted as a Google Doc, right? With open editing so I can comment on it, okay? Done as a traditional academic paper. And you also owe me an infographic. That's one of the reasons why you can't start on this project on, I don't know, August or on April 9th, right? That would just not work because look at all these steps that are involved, right? Right now you're going to be comparing, contrasting, and doing your research, right? But you're going to have to write that paper and create an infographic, right? And what's really cool is you can see some great examples of what other students have done by their creative work, really creative projects. And you're going to want to look really carefully at how you meet my expectations by looking at the criteria for evaluation, right? So both of those projects come together and you have to post them. Every student has to post both documents on your blog. And then you tweet out a link using the hashtag 416. Okay, what other questions do you have?
So the infographic is collaborative as well. We don't each have to produce one?
Yes, you produce one infographic collaboratively. Good question. What other questions do you have? Okay, so we have 10 minutes left. Let me talk to you about what I'd like you to do for our next class, because we're going to be in the really horrifying and awful and scary part of the past next week as we look at Hitler's formation of the Ministry of Propaganda. And let me just see if I can turn to our path right. Let me turn to the path right and share with you what I'd like you to do for next week. Okay, so let me close this out. I have so many windows open. I hope I can share this with you. Good. Okay, propaganda and persuasion in the racial state. Our focus question for next week is, how is propaganda used to create a sense of us versus them? That's what we're going to be focusing on. I only have a few things for you to do. Most important thing, of course, is we're going to be reading chapter 3 of State of Deception. Just like last time, what I'd like you to do is, take a photo of a cool part of the book, share with me something interesting you learned, and then insert an image from the book that illustrates or extends the meaning of your post. You're doing that here using the answer tool, right? After you do that, then we get to watch this amazing film, Forbidden Films, directed by Felix Muller. In this fascinating and important film, director Felix Muller interviews German film historians, archivists, and film viewers in an investigation of the power and potential danger of cinema when used for ideological purposes. As you watch the film, consider the central question: should Nazi propaganda films be released from the vault and made available to the German public? Why or why not? What we're going to learn is that 400 films are still illegal to view in Germany. They're under lock and key, and they can only be viewed in a limited circumstances. We're going to ask this question: is it time now for those questions to come out of the vault? In a way, we're kind of returning back to the beginning of the semester. You remember when we watched Look Who's Back? But this is a documentary film. And what's really cool is that it's built by showing us a group of students and the general public who are watching these films in 3 different cities, in Munich, in Tel Aviv, and in Paris. Now, to access this film, you have to use the university's streaming service, and I'm modeling that process for you now. You see, when I clicked on that link, I was taken to the University of Rhode Island's library, right? And this is available through the Carruthers Library Media Resource Collection. See where it says online access? I click there, and then I have to use my credentials to register. This is restricted only to students of the University of Rhode Island. And then it opens up a window where I can begin watching the film directly. And it's warning me that sometimes it won't, sometimes it'll be down, but most of the time it's working. What's really cool is that
Wenn es zu einer Entzündung käme, dann würde das.
I've already started this film. You see the transcript on one side. After the war, the Allies banned the propaganda and they stored it in this vault. 40 of these films cannot be viewed. There are still restrictions on the 40 films that are considered the worst propaganda. So this guy gives us a tour of the vault, and the film then goes on to show you examples from the film. So you're going to be watching examples from some of the most virulent propaganda that's ever been created, right? So that's pretty much the most important thing you do. Let me just go back once again. I've gotten out of my path, right? Darn it. Maybe the best way for me to do that is to go back in. And there's one other thing that I want you to do after you watch that film. Let me just see if I can pull it up here. Because I'm aware that you're going to be working pretty intensively on LEAP 3 now, I am trying to design all of the learning activities to sort of support your really strategic thinking about the past and comparing it to the present. This film knocked me off my feet. I'll tell you a funny story about watching this film. After I watched this film, I was watching this film with my husband, and he was like, wow, that film, Jude Sus, that's like an amazing film. Let's watch the whole thing on YouTube. And I was like, if I watch the whole thing on YouTube, then Nazi KKK ads are going to follow me around on the internet, right? So I was a little nervous about that. So he watched it on his computer, and we watched it together, and it was absolutely horrible. And then, just as we predicted, he got some anti-Semitic advertising that followed him through for a couple of weeks. So it was kind of creepy. So I don't recommend that you do that. I think watch the documentary instead. Notice we're going to have our synchronous class on March 28th, and quiz number 3 is open to you. And quiz number 3 is something that you should plan to take within the next 5 days. This is actually measuring your comprehension of key ideas from the state of deception. Please be sure that you read both chapters before you take this quiz, right? So this quiz is measuring your ability to read from the beginning of the book up to page 100, right? So please be sure you do that by next week. All right, what questions do you have as we finish out our session tonight? You're going to get deep into the heart of the power of dictatorship for propaganda and learning about the propaganda ministry that Joseph Goebbels established with the film, with a focus on the films that he produced, is going to blow your mind, and it's going to make you start thinking about propaganda in a different way too. So have fun with this week's class. I'll see you guys a week from today. Good luck with the snowstorm, all right? Bye.